Welcome to Unlocking Your Full Potential. And today, oh wow, international guest, the man that is known by so many, a leader of leaders, no one else but Andrew Stotts. Andrew, how are you doing?
Dr. Anthony, I am incredibly flattered. um, Ramadan Kareem.
Well, I must say it's great to see you again. You know, you and I, obviously, and what's so nice is that it's not just business. It's know that we've sat around a table, we've had a good ale together. There's a relationship, and I think that's really what it's about. So, if you're serious about doing business with Stotts over here, Stotts for short, you need to know one thing: the man is a human being, loves to live life to the fullest, but the moment he stops and he concentrates on business, he changes a gear. And Andrew, the reason why we're on here today is that Institute of Leadership accolade in terms of fellow mentor. What is that about?
Righty. Well, it's something that I am incredibly proud of, first of all. So actually, and it's also quite opportunistic because it is currently International Leadership Week. So the ILM effectively are the governing body in the UK that kind of underpin leadership within the UK. They currently have 55,000 members. I'm incredibly privileged that a few months ago they kind of reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to become a fellow of the ILM? So I did that. And I've since then I've been on my kind of mentoring journey with them as well. So they certify mentors and coaches in the UK and obviously around the world as well. And now I'm fortunate enough to have kind of completed my mentorship training and accreditation and my coaching training and accreditation. I've been coaching for more than 30 years now. I know you're staggered to hear that, but I've been working all over the world, as far flung as kind of Russia, all over the GCC, the UK, the US, New York, obviously all over Europe, originally British, currently in Abu Dhabi. So yeah, it's quite an eclectic and wide ranging. Actually, I missed out Australia. I can't believe I missed out Sydney in Australia, but and a bit of work in South Africa as well, Johannesburg, the beautiful Johannesburg, and lastly Cape Town. But yeah, amazing.
Well, with knowing all of that, if I'm the mentee sitting here and I'm looking at Stas and I'm going, look, this guy's got years of experience. He's internationally acclaimed, Australia, UK, UAE, etc. What would that hold for me as mentee? What can I be expecting if I were to sit under your tutorship, your tutelage, in terms of you be the mentor or me being the mentee? Help me understand that.
I think probably you can expect to be quite challenged. I think that's really, really important for me. I feel I want to add value. So definitely quite a fairly lengthy part of contracting at the beginning of the relationship to understand exactly what you need from that relationship. I really major in authenticity, honesty, really, and helping people to kind of like self-reflect and be the best possible leader they can be. I think mentoring is quite an interesting topic. I suppose my real kind of area of expertise is facilitation, presenting, and kind of like writing. So that sort of work is obviously fairly is a fond kind of favorite of mine. But having said that, it's really about the mentee and what the mentee wants from our relationship and our conversations.
I take it that when you basically have a person that's going through your hands and being led to the next level, that he or she can expect you. I call bull dust. That's definitely not on. I can just hear you saying bull dust. Am I right in assuming that you're prepared to call it when you have to?
Yeah, I think sometimes people I do a lot of stuff around also accountability and responsibility, and I think that's a really important point as well. So I learned a long time ago the importance of ownership. So I kind of a lot of people kind of like attribute me with that kind of own it sort of slogan. I think that's a really really important point. It's about taking personal responsibility, personal accountability for our actions. I'm also a big believer in, I think sometimes people they really kind of struggle with this, but the idea that we can only really control one thing, and that's what we think, Dr. Ant. So yeah, so I think that it's really about kind of helping people get a grip of kind of what they're thinking, and how they're acting, and perhaps reset their course. Yeah.
Well, alongside with you, having spoken to a lot of other people, I think you would agree with me. One of the main contributing factors would be self-sabotage. I found that so many people actually are the very reason, the reason why they're not getting to the next level, and that is self-sabotage. And often they can't see it, but others can.
I think self-sabotage is definitely one of them. I think the other thing is probably is one of the things I see the most is probably imposter syndrome as well. I think it's amazing how people feel that they are probably not good enough, which obviously goes back to that kind of like self-sabotage. It's actually amazing. They most human beings have this incredible talent, this incredible ability. I think the challenge that most human beings face is that they're not really prepared to commit enough energy and effort to the change. They're really helping people on that kind of change journey, really making them more kind of self-reflective and getting them to really understand about their kind of key strengths and perhaps their development areas are going to be really important parts of the conversation, Anthony. Yes.
One of the statements that you and I did not want to hear as junior management was change is here to stay. The only thing that is consistent is change. And I know that we used to kick against
Yes.
it because, if we've been doing it like this for 20 years, why on earth should be given to the cycle of change? And that's something that you and I have to deal with. So when somebody sits there and says, Andrew, I don't feel like it, what would you say to them? What would the approach be?
Well, that's absolutely fine. If you don't feel like it, that's absolutely fine. But the reality is, you're not going to change anything by sort of like those kind of statements. There's always three parts of change. There's going to be the impact on the person or the people who are kind of like making the change, but there's also that huge piece around giving structure to the change, the system, and then actually the process as well. So I think that really helping people understand that, like most things in life, there's solid recipes that can be taught to help people take those steps. And of course, when you're applying those recipes at the beginning of any journey, doesn't matter if you're baking a cake or learning to juggle or learning to make a balloon animal or learning to be a better leader or take the next step in your career. There are basic, simple recipes to follow, and those recipes at the beginning may be consciously followed, but ultimately, if you practice enough of a recipe, then you become kind of unconsciously competent, which I think is an important part of our journey. But it's all journeys start with that piece of self-reflection and understanding ourselves first, because it's very hard to take a journey unless we fully understand that there is perhaps we become what I would call consciously incompetent, or we know that we don't know, and we're then keen to take the journey. Anthony, I think those are critical parts to probably the most essential part to anybody's journey at the beginning. It's that piece of self-reflection. It's a piece of being. You need some perhaps maybe overused word, but a little bit of tough love can really really help
Yeah.
people.
Well, obviously, for that tough love to be set in the right setting, it would actually take direct communication from the mentor. Because as a mentor, we do know that communication is where we basically call it the milestone check in, where you basically check in with a mentee from time to time, sporadically, but you have to communicate clearly. And also, there has been milestones in terms of what were you expected to achieve by such and such a date or time. And if they didn't, well, it opens up the conversation, but it takes the mentee to understand that the mentor is at liberty to say, I call it because you said by Tuesday, 12 o'clock, I would have your new redefined goals in writing, and I never received them. So the communication aspect of it and milestones. Talk to me about those two, how you apply them.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Is having clarity and ownership around the kind of the goal, what we're trying to achieve together in our relationship is absolutely fascinating. Clearly mapping out the kind of critical steps. I think sometimes I'm kind of mindful of there's a little bit of a story of my daughter used to be a very very good swimmer. Swam for her university.
Mm.
At the beginning, and it has always been a good. So we've lived by the beach for a very long time. I kind of grew up living on a beach, so as a kind of consequence of that, I'm a relatively good swimmer. Probably not as fast as I used to be when I was younger, but still, I would say a very competent swimmer. And I remember my daughter, we spent a lot of time teaching and training and developing particularly she's a very natural swimmer. but I remember her entering her first race for her university, and we were obviously there, and it was a big event for her. She came in eighth, 8 out of 8. And she was hugely disappointed
Okay.
with her performance. But immediately said to her, "Hang on a second, George. Let's just remember a couple of things here. Actually, that's the fastest you've ever swum 50 meters. So not only was it the fastest you've ever swum 50 meters, you've actually taken 3 seconds off your personal best
Wow.
for that 50 meters.
Well, on
So I
50
think
meters, that is a lot.
sometimes it is a lot, and doing it, and it still resulted in her coming last. But it's the race is against yourself. It's not against the other 7 competitors. It's and over time she's going to get better. But you have to recognize that sometimes other people are more talented than you, and perhaps they put more effort in. So you need to appreciate the incredible success you're making on your journey. Yeah. And I think everyone is different. Everyone is unique, and everyone is you know, I'm hesitating to use the word special here, but we are very, very unique beings, and we need to take personal responsibility. So that just those small kind of like steps, we can see the journey we're taking, we can see the progress we're making. Being very, very, very clear around that is important. I like the mnemonic of smarter. A lot of people are very familiar with kind of the SMART model. I prefer adding an additional A. And I think there's 2 areas that are really, really important when we're developing ourselves. First
Yeah.
one is specifically what we're trying to change, what we're
Yeah.
trying to develop. And then finally, are we agreeing to that? So, the MART, so the measurable, the achievable, the relevant, the time bound, the MART in the smarter model, relatively simple. That's an easy conversation. That's an action. That's what we have to do and how we do it. But the why, the very specific we're trying to achieve, and agreeing that is the right course of action, I think is absolutely critical to any mentoring relationship and conversation.
You see, one of the leadership pitfalls I've found is the absence of celebrating small wins. Now, in your daughter's case, as you said, the fastest 50 she's ever swum, taking 3 seconds off her PB. I mean, that is remarkable. And we tend to, because of competition, we tend to lose focus of context, because contextualization is everything. And in that context, she actually did brilliantly. Um, and it takes mentorship like yourself, being a leader, to say, look through the facts again. It doesn't matter where you end it, it's a personal triumph. It is definitely something to celebrate. I want you to celebrate the small win that you actually competed and you were elected to compete in the first place. So, that whole thing of the pitfall, we have to work through that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's just try and be better than you were yesterday. That's the bottom line is. I mean, that's something that I've carried with me for the last 59 years. It's literally how can I be, better than I was yesterday on my journey. We're all, even at 59 now, I still feel that I'm kind of growing and learning and developing. Luckily for me, I've managed to amass quite a lot of experience and quite a few tools on that journey, which I think is really, really useful. About yeah, it's a bit shocking really. About 20,000 learning resources, books, and reference tools at my fingertips. So I'm almost called the librarian. People say, "Oh, you're like it's Andrew the librarian now." So actually being able to point people in the direction of some really, really good kind of learning content, and I think it's really reflective, that content. Just guiding them and helping them. And I try to give people. Some people don't like reading, and I kind of get that. But even the people that don't particularly like reading and committing time to that, just sending short articles, just short statements makes a massive, massive difference. Allowing them to reflect on that and actually understand and discuss their reflections sort of post reading or post learning, I think can be very, very impactful. Dr. Anthony, yeah.
The one thing I don't want to slip past is the actual beauty of sometimes you do something so naturally you don't even realize. And that is by coming in as the librarian, you have actually mastered the art as a mentor to send them to do the work for themselves and not to do the work for them. So you just point them in the right direction, and that gets them going because the accountability lies with the incumbent to be successful. Now, obviously, a mentor like yourself who's You've been there, and you actually know the essence of the individual doing it themselves is going to be a far greater benefit than you just doing it for them to quickly get it over and done with, but pointing them in the right direction. And quite rightly, being the librarian, and everybody knows you that you have got this reservoir of resources that you can point them to, is actually a massive, massive strength. Because remember, that's also the art of facilitation. That's your leadership style that says, I will facilitate the information and I will lead and connect the individual with the content required for the result. Because you see, what people don't realize is a person like you with your experience has already gone ahead of them, reversed engineered it back to know in order for them to get the resource, I need to direct them to point X, Y, or Z. And I think people miss that it's actually a skill, it's actually a gift in a sense of you to be able to point them in the right direction. And I hope people see that when you work with it.
Yeah, I'm also a big fan of what I call my kind of reverse mentoring. So I love I have a couple of I'm a I think reverse mentoring, particularly for my generation, is really, really important. So we're overrun now with change in our societies and the way that we lead and we work. I mean, we're kind of like in leadership, 4.0. I mean, the world of leadership has changed massively. I think we probably started at leadership 2.0 when I was a young man. Now we're in the era of leadership 4.0. So I think it's really important to use those technologies around us, and those technologies are best taught by reverse mentoring, because I'm conscious about how I'm like interacting with the world, but I only really came to technology in my probably early 30s, which is a long time ago. Most of the people I'm now working with were born with technology, and they were kind of like it's almost part of them to
Mm.
use these kind of devices and these tools. So actually asking for their advice and their guidance and their support when we're trying to leverage some of these tools can be very, very impactful.
Now, you will recall
Yeah.
that you and I spoke about artificial intelligence a while ago in terms of
Oh
artificial
gosh.
intelligence is real and is here to stay. However, there's a human factor that you do not want to get away from. And that is that without the human factor, it's not going to fly, because artificial intelligence can take you thus far, but it's your basic skill, your acumen as a human, and the interaction between you and AI actually is the ideal solution. So although they come from an IT background, artificial intelligence is going to be a big hook for them to say, well, that is the way of the future, but not to neglect the human skill and ability that becomes, can I say, a hybrid model of the two engaging to be the success of the future.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important point. We see it's a skill that I'm seeing is almost the ability to connect and to build rapport and to understand another human being, and even become I think it's a very interesting word, but kind of charisma. That is a skill that seems to be a bit of a dying art, if I'm honest. And I would definitely encourage, everyone I work with to really try and develop that kind of charisma, that tool, that ability to connect. I was working with a lady in Singapore this morning, first thing, and she just really struggles with the idea that she's so used to being behind a screen that she's never really learned to interact with people, and finds it almost quite intimidating when she's face to face with somebody. And it's actually trying to help her, sort of mentor her through those kind of simple interactions. And that's actually how we kind of like build her confidence when she's working with human beings face to face, as opposed to working with human beings. She's very confident behind the screen on a keyboard, but actually getting from behind her keyboard. I was saying to her even this morning, try to move away from using AI, using those incredible tools, using the systems that we have at our fingertips. Using your keyboard is useful, but really it should be a follow up as opposed to your first approach. Because sometimes when you're just hiding behind your keyboard, things become much easier. If you're actually looking people in the eye and actually practicing those, being present, actively listening to people, forming conversations, using what's being said to create another conversation. These are very, very, very important skills, which I think future generations would be very, very wise to keep learning. So I think it's I get called the weird human as well quite a lot. But I think it's important to recognize and really embrace the weirdness of being human. We're all kind of unique, Anthony. So I know people call me weird, but I'm always proud and embrace that word because I definitely see myself as the weird human.
Well, being different doesn't mean that you're not effective. And certainly, I found you
Yes.
also one of those weird guys. But when it comes to charisma, you have become so professional in terms of applying that charisma. Now, thinking of this mentee of yours, you need the charisma, but it takes courage to get there. Now, you spoke about confidence, but sometimes that confidence needs to be boosted with courage in order to go to the next step. And it's just that lack of courage. And this is where the mentor like yourself will come in and just push gently, but not push them to the end that they will actually fall into the ocean. And that takes a little bit of experience to know just that little bit of push to bring the courage forward.
I think it's about creating safety. I think when I was listening to you then, it's a bit like when you're teaching a child, well, when you're supporting a child learning to walk, you take some obvious steps. You'll start to recognize that I know you're great, you're a grandparent. I'm not honored to be a grandparent, but I have just kind of grown up children. And when a child is learning to walk for the first time, you recognize the signs. You can start to see that they're probably attempting to do that.
Yeah.
Also, their point of reference is going to be, you as the parent, and you're probably, you're walking, and you're mobile, unconsciously competent, right? So you're easily able to walk. But for me, and it's such a useful analogy, is it's creating safe space to learn. So when a child is learning to walk, it's completely natural for us to cover up plug sockets, to close, to lock doors. It's completely, to remove kind of like sharp objects, sharp edges. Those things get removed, right? So we're enabling a safe space to learn, but also we know as adults and as competent walkers that children will fall, and when they fall, we don't kind of criticize them and complain about how incompetent they are. We're there embracing them, supporting them, and helping them to encouraging them to do it again. So inevitably, when you're learning anything, you do tend to fall, and you do tend to get bruised a little bit. It doesn't matter if you're learning to walk or learning to drive or learning to deliver a presentation. All of those things can be quite bruising experiences. I sort of famously juggle chainsaws. And I think, when you're learning to juggle chainsaws, you learn to juggle clubs. But learning to juggle clubs, you get black eyes. You get you because these things hit you in the face. And when they hit you in the face, it hurts. But it doesn't stop you from pushing forward. Some people might say, well, actually, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get hit in the face with a club. I don't want to get hit in the face with a chainsaw. Therefore, I probably want to, clearly you can tell I've been hit in the face with a chainsaw quite a few times, but being hit in the face is something you need to kind of like, overcome. And that's unfortunately part of life, but it also creates resilience, grittiness,
Mm.
determination, and also, and confidence as well. So I think they're important things to flag as well, Anthony. Yeah.
Well, I mean, when I learned that you actually can do chainsaw juggling, I thought myself, at first I thought you've had too many beers, I'll be honest with you. And then I realized you truly did it. And with that comes the safety aspect was the care was there to say, do it with um, can I say, another instrument until such time as your confidence has grown to you say, right, now let me take up the real thing. And that's the process. Leadership is the process of developing from one step to the next. It's literally, how do you get to the top of the stairs? Well, that's to literally get onto the first flight, into the second flight, and the third flight, and then gradually make yourself to the top. And that's what you did, and successfully did that. But because you accepted the challenge to actually be successful. And you were not going to give up until you mastered the art. Now, the same with leadership. I know that you and I encourage people to say, do not give up the first time you trip up because it's part of the course, because you cannot the start of being Mr. and Mrs. Perfect at all times. Imagine a child that when he fell down the first time he tried to walk and go, oh, give it up as a bad job. It would be devastating. But it's like it's going to help. And like you explained, the risk mitigation side, which is the business side of taking the sharp objects away for now until the child has got a clear path to practice what they do. Now, I know for you, with your leadership skills as a mentor, You have created just like what I see is a bowling lane, like 10-pin bowling. You sometimes
Yeah,
you put up
structure.
you've got the protective sides to help them not going into the gutter when they start until such time as they've mastered the sufficient art to say we can now take the railings away. And I think that is the safety that people will look for because of your experience. If you wanted them to fail, you say just go for it. You're a gutter ball, you know, and you have the
You want,
experience to
I think
lead them.
there's, yeah, it's interesting. I think sometimes I kind of like I interviewed. I'm slightly embarrassed by it now, but I did actually interview Elon Musk once upon a time, and one of the kind of the key learnings from that Mr. Musk kind of shared with me is his incredible desire to fail really fast. So he really wants to fail fast, and because I think there's a lot more learning from failure than there is from success, if I'm honest. And that's this is Musk rather than me speaking, but I think that's a really important point, and I think it's something I've encouraging, not deliberately encouraging failure, but encouraging people to have a go and actually exploring failure and what happened. It can be so incredibly insightful. I think so many people are too scared to fail, and then they
Well,
get that kind of like that fear of failure gets in their way, and then they're missing out on a big learning opportunity.
Well, one of the leadership gurus of the world, Dr. John C. Maxwell, and I know you're also a fan. I mean, what does he say about
Hmm.
failure? When you fail, fail forward. He says, at least take
Yeah,
some ground, man. So when you go down forward and take some ground. But remember, failure is part of your growth process to help you to the next step of success. And yes, a great mentor will
it
know
is.
to help people fail, but not in such a way to drown them or to hurt them. That's the key difference. You know, in terms of being a great mentor, you walk alongside them and you allow them to fail, but not to the extent that you break their will and you break their courage, because it's not going to have the winning result in the end.
But it's really, I would again, expand on the analogy of learning of a child learning to walk. I think one of the hardest things for me in my life, definitely raising children, was allowing your children to learn to drive. And I think that's quite a challenge because there's a lot of variables in learning to drive. But also there are stakeholders. In this case, my wife, is a major stakeholder. My wife's a major stakeholder in, teaching our children to do almost everything, but definitely to learn to walk. So obviously there is a stakeholder, another party. Often in work, in business, we have stakeholders, right? And we want to encourage an individual to learn through failure and failing fast and failing forward, but also we have to be mindful of other stakeholders, right? In a mother father child kind of like relationship, you've got a lot of love there, right? And so your wife, your husband would never forgive you if you did the child damage. So
Absolutely.
you want them to learn. If you so there's a you want them to learn for him. You want them to learn to walk, to drive, to run, to juggle, whatever it is. You really need to be kind of there for them. So
Yeah.
it's important that you bear in mind other stakeholders and other partners in the relationship. Yeah.
Well, as we come to the end of this program today, again, I want to tell you, Stotts, I'm one of the fans. I'm one of your fans. You know that. I highly celebrate everything that you do. It's such an honor to be working with you. And when it comes to the issue of leadership, in this case, it was a fellow mentor walking alongside people. What is the one takeaway you'd like to just share with that mentee sitting here saying, maybe I should try Andrew Stotts? I think he's the guy. What is your advice to that person?
Keep it authentic, keep being curious, keep learning. Remember that learning journey is never over. And I would say you don't need to be try not to be stupider than you need to be. I think that makes people laugh. You don't need to be. I think you have a responsibility to yourself to kind of challenge yourself. And none of us, and most definitely including myself, none of us are the finished product. So we're always learning, always improving. And I think my last point, I mentioned it earlier, was just try to be a tiny bit better today than you were yesterday.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, the great Andrew Stotts giving advice from years of experience. I know that he's just about to turn 60. Can you just imagine how much wisdom is in that
I know it's a
head?
terrible
So
thought.
we
That's it.
celebrate that.
I'm actually quite proud of that. I'm quite proud of that fact, to be honest. I'm quite happy to be I'm
Absolutely.
into my last year being 50, yeah, last year's of 50s. So it's exciting time. Exciting time.
Very exciting time. So, all I can say to you listening today, remember, if you want to unlock your full potential, one of the guys you want to say to yourself, there's a great mentor that I know, and his name is Andrew Stotts, and he's willing to walk the journey with you. Take care.